Hey everyone, so a few weeks ago I filmed a video sharing some of my favorite neutral eyeshadow palettes, just some of my go-to palettes that I love to reach for every single day, but I thought I would also share some of my favorite colorful eyeshadow palettes because I also love colorful eyeshadow so much, and I think I have something that will work for you no matter where you're at, whether you love to wear colorful eyeshadow every single day or if you're just looking to try it out for the first time. I have a bunch of affordable options as well as some high-end options that I definitely think are worth the money, and I would love to hear from you because I know there are so many brands that are really well known for colorful eyeshadow, indie brands, smaller brands, and I would love to try out some of those. So let me know in the comment section below which palette is your favorite. So one of my favorite brands for colorful eyeshadow would have to be JUVIA'S place. That's one of the reasons why I really started getting into brighter eyeshadow because they have so many beautiful, intensely rich and pigmented palettes. They are a Black-owned beauty brand and they offer so many amazing options. Now I have a couple to share with you guys in today's video. One of my favorite palettes is the Magic Mini palette. This one comes with 16 amazing shadows. Now there are just a couple of neutrals in here, but for the most part in today's video, I chose completely colorful palettes. And the majority of the shades in here are definitely colorful. What's nice about this palette is you get a little bit of everything. So you get some really intense reds and oranges. You also get a few pastels, and then you also get some really gorgeous jewel tones like greens and blues. So no matter what type of look you like to do, or if you're just starting to get into color, this might be a nice palette because you can really do anything with it. I love using this as an accent palette, so typically I might use some neutral eyeshadow to build my look and then choose one or two shades to kind of finish it off. But if you are really creative with eyeshadow, you can do some really interesting looks with this. I tend to use the bottom half because I love the blues and greens, but overall it's such a fun palette, and I love that you get so many amazing choices just in one palette. Now I know green eyeshadow is kind of trendy right now. We're seeing it all over the place, and there are so many pretty green palettes on the market, but if you're looking for a little bit more of a unique take on a greenish palette, I do recommend the Tribe palette. So this one comes with 9 eyeshadows. You get a few orangey tones, but for the most part, it's a very greenish blue palette. For me, this is not an everyday palette because the colors are definitely unique and interesting, and I don't tend to reach for them all the time. But whenever I want colors like this palette performs perfectly. So you get a bunch of matte shadows, and then these shades in the center, I hope they show up well on camera. I'll do a close-up shot for you, but sometimes the background of this palette can kind of mess with my lighting. But these are like duochrome, so they look really interesting on the eyes. They just transform your entire look. So if you're someone who has a lot of colorful eyeshadow and you're looking for something unique and different, this might be a great option for you. Like I said, there are a lot of options. I've been wanting to try out a couple of their new palettes. The new Wahala palette is so pretty and colorful. Wahala 2 is an amazing palette if you love like blues and greens. And then they also have the Tribe 3 palette, which is completely colorful, the Zulu palette. There are so many different options. So I only shared 2 in today's video, but honestly, if you're looking for a colorful palette, JUVIA'S place is a great option. Now, another one of my go-to brands for colorful eyeshadow would have to be ColourPop, and that's because ColourPop is on the more affordable side. So if you don't wear color every single day, you might not want to invest in an expensive colorful eyeshadow palette. So ColourPop gives you the chance to try color without spending a ton of money. On top of that, their formula is easy to work with. The matte shadows tend to be very, very blendable, and sometimes colorful matte shadows are a little bit more difficult to work with. So I love ColourPop because you can blend the eyeshadow out really easily, and it's just a little bit more approachable. On top of that, they have 9-pan palettes that are dedicated to a very specific color story. So if you want to try blue eyeshadow, they have one. If you want to try green, they have some as well. So I do recommend any of their colorful 9-pan palettes. They have so many to choose from, and I do have the majority of them, and I think they all perform really well. I just chose 2 to share with you guys in today's video. So if you are someone who likes softer, more toned down colorful shades, you might enjoy the Lilac palette. They have a few of these pastel palettes, so they have a mint one, a peach one, and then also this one. I'm wearing 2 of these shades all over the lid today, along with another palette that I'll talk about in a second. So I'm wearing the shade Fluff and then also the shade Wake Me. But I love this palette because it helps you incorporate color in a little bit more of a practical way if you're not used to wearing a lot of bold color on the eyes. You can do a really soft, subtle wash of color, and then there are a couple of deeper shades in here as well to kind of darken things up. So this one is a really nice, approachable palette. I feel like when it comes to colorful eyeshadow, purple as a whole tends to be a little bit less intimidating than maybe blue or green. So I think that you would really enjoy this one. Now, if you do like blue eyeshadow or you want to try it out, the Blue Moon palette is one of my favorites as well. I was so excited when they released this because I was kind of going through like a blue eyeshadow phase, and there are so many different variations of blue within this palette. So whether you like to do something, again, a little bit softer or like a deep navy or just like a bright splash of blue all over the eyes, this palette is a lot of fun to work with. And again, the matte shadows are very blendable. So they're not difficult to use. You can just blend them onto the eyes, take any shimmer, apply it all over the lid, and you're good to go. So I definitely recommend these. I talk about this palette all the time on my channel, but it's because I love it so much. It is the ColourPop Disney Villains Misunderstood palette. I actually didn't try this palette when they first released it because the color story is a little bit different. So I felt like it was kind of intimidating and I wasn't sure what to do with it. But I started using it as more of an accent palette, so I would do the majority of my look with maybe more of a neutral toned down palette, and then I would take one or two of the shadows in here and place them all over the lid, and I just felt like it completely transformed my look. There are so many interesting colors in this palette. And again, there are a few pops of neutrals, but I feel like for the most part, it is a very, very colorful palette, and it is a great option if you're starting to get into color, but you don't know where to start because these shadows perform extremely well. For the most part, you get shimmers, so you can apply them with your finger. And then I think there are maybe like 4 or 5 matte shadows in here that do lean a little bit more neutral, so they can help to balance out the more colorful shades. But it is a great option, especially if you like shimmers. The last ColourPop palette I want to share with you guys is a little bit of a newer addition to my collection, but I think it is such a great option if you like a little bit more of a smoky eyeshadow look. So this is the Baroque palette. First of all, the packaging is gorgeous. They released 3 of these palettes in this collection. The other 2 are really pretty as well, but they are a little bit more neutral toned overall. So I wanted to share this one with you guys because this one has a lot of gorgeous colors. It comes with 9 different shadows and they all kind of have a little bit of like a grayed out navy tone to them. I think that this palette puts a nice spin on the typical smoky eye. So instead of the usual grays and silvers and blacks that you get in a smoky palette, you do get some steel toned blues, some silvery browns with again a little bit of a blue undertone, and then some navies as well. So I think that this palette is gorgeous. It is so much fun. I've used it a couple of times and I've really enjoyed the quality, but I think it's just different. It's unique to the ColourPop collection and unique to my collection as well. So if you're looking for more of a colorful, smoky toned palette, this one is a great choice. E.L.F Cosmetics is known for their really fun, colorful palettes, and they do color so well. Again, they're a brand that's not really afraid to commit to a completely colorful palette, which I love so much. So I'm a little bit newer to the brand, but I've really been enjoying the products that I own. I recently picked up the She's and Parties palette. This is the one that I have on my eyes today, along with those 2 shadows from the ColourPop Lilac U.L.F palette. This palette comes with 8 purple shadows with the exception of this first shade right here, but the rest of them are all very purpley, very pretty on the eyes. So I'm wearing the shade Total Immortal as a transition color, and then I'm wearing the shade Last Caress in the crease, and then I'm also wearing Mean Streak in the outer corner, and I did wear the shade Sleepwalk as like a base shadow all over the lid. I've been enjoying this palette so much because you can do a little bit more of a dark purple smoky eye, but you can also do something really light and fun if you incorporate this lighter shimmer shadow. And these shadows, again, are very easy to work with. Now, Melt is kind of known for their really intense, rich shadows, and these are definitely intense and rich, but they also blend out a little bit easier than some of the other Melt palettes that I've tried. What's nice is the shadows just hold their pigmentation as you blend them out onto the eyes, so they're not going to disappear. You don't have to necessarily layer them up over and over to get really intense color, and I just think that they look really pretty on the eyes. The palette as a whole coordinates very well. So if you love purple eyeshadow, but sometimes you don't know what colors to pair together, you could go in with any combination of these and have a really complete look. The only thing that this palette is missing is maybe like some really intense shimmery metallics. For the most part, you get mattes and then like subtle satins. So I do love a really intense shimmery lid, so I'll tend to reach into another palette like the ColourPop palette or a single shadow to kind of complete the look. But if you do love matte shadow eyeshadows and satins overall. I think you'll enjoy this one, and I'm just loving it. I think it's a lot of fun. The other melt palette I wanted to share with you guys is the Smoke Sessions palette. So this one is going to be ideal for you if you love green eyeshadow. And this one does have some really gorgeous metallics in it. For the most part, it is a metallic based palette with just 2 matte shadows. So that might be a selling point, or it might be a deterrent for you, just kind of depending on what you typically go for. For me, I love metallic, so I'm all about that, but typically I will have to reach into maybe just another palette to kind of complete my look. The shadows in here perform really well. Black Widow was initially a little bit of a dud for me, but after I've kind of worked my way through the top layer, I do find that it performs a little bit better. Now, melt palettes are expensive, so I would really only recommend them if you love colorful eyeshadow, if you think you would get a lot of use out of the palette. I purchased their Muerte palette last year, which was part of their holiday release, and the palette is amazing. It has greens and blues and reds, but I don't find that I reach for it as much as these 2 palettes. So I almost wish that I didn't purchase it, just because it kind of sits in my collection for the majority of the year, and I only pull it out every once in a while. So I would say that these palettes are worth the investment if you think you'll wear the shadows a lot. Otherwise, it might be more ideal to go for like a ColourPop palette that doesn't cost as much. I do have another alternative for the Smoke Sessions palette. So if the shadows in here really appeal to you, but you don't want to spend the money on this palette, the E.L.F. bite-sized eyeshadow palette in Hot Jalapeno comes very, very close. Now, this only has 4 shadows. The melt palette has 8 shadows, so you're not going to get, you know, every single look that you could get out of this palette. But this palette kind of has 2 sides. So it has like this greenish gold side and then also this minty side as well. If the greenish gold side is what appeals to you, this palette has very, very similar shades, and you can get a very intense look using this little quad. I am a big fan of the E.L.F. bite-sized palettes in general, but the majority of them are neutral or toned down, but this one is a very colorful option that is a lot of fun. So again, if you're new to color and you just don't want to spend the money on an expensive palette, this is $3. And it's a good way to incorporate it every once in a while without, you know, breaking the bank or investing in an expensive palette. If you're someone who loves the brand NATASHA DENONA and you like to invest in a little bit more of an expensive eyeshadow, they do have a few colorful palettes. I don't own a ton of palettes from the brand. I have 2 neutral palettes and 2 colorful palettes. The 2 colorful palettes that I own are the Love palette and then also the Sunrise palette. Out of the 2, I think the Love palette is definitely better in terms of quality because the majority of the 15 shadows that you get in here perform extremely well, and they blend out well. They look amazing on the eyes. What I love about this palette is just the color story as a whole. It's a very pinky purple palette, and I love wearing pinks and purples on the eyes, but some of the shadows in here are just a little bit different than shadows in other palettes that I own. A lot of pink toned palettes and purple toned palettes can look very, very similar, but I think that this one has some unique tones in it. Again, there are a few pops of neutral, but for the most part, it is a very colorful palette. So when I'm reaching for pinks or purples, or I want to do a really intense berry eyeshadow look, this is a palette that I love to reach for because the shadows do perform extremely well. I also wanted to mention the NATASHA DENONA Sunrise palette. Now, there are maybe 2 or 3 shadows in here that do not perform perfectly, and when you're spending this much on an eyeshadow palette, you expect the majority, if not all of them, to perform extremely well. So I did want to throw it out there. There are maybe 1 or 2 that are slightly patchy, and then 1 or 2 that are kind of lackluster, but as a whole, it is a very gorgeous palette. I know some people say this palette performs extremely well, so it might come down to personal preference, but I do love the variety of shadows in this palette. So you do get some lighter shades, but also some really bright, intense, colorful shades, and I just think it has a nice mix of tones. So for $65, you really are getting quite the variety of shadows in here, including pinks, oranges, yellows, light pinks, golds, and I do think that it is a fun option. So if it goes on sale, or if you really do like the formula and you want to give it a shot, there are a lot of pretty colors in here, but out of the 2, I think I like the Love palette a little bit better just because it does perform extremely well, and I'm a big pink and purple eyeshadow fan. Like I said, the majority of the palettes that I wanted to include in today's video were mainly colorful palettes with maybe just like a few pops of neutral. I really tried to stay away from half colorful, half neutral palettes, But I kind of wanted to give an honorable mention to the Urban Decay Naked palettes. Not the original Naked palettes like Naked 1, 2, and 3, or even Naked Reloaded, but they're more colorful palettes. So I've said this a lot over the years, but I think that these palettes are a nice introduction to color if you're used to wearing neutral eyeshadow and you don't know where to start, because they take colorful eyeshadow and they make it extremely approachable. Now, if you are a big colorful eyeshadow fan, you might look at these palettes and say they're not colorful at all, which I feel like is fair, but I think what's nice about the Urban Decay Naked line is that it's kind of meant for people who love to wear neutrals and tone down eyeshadow in general. So when they started doing these updated Naked palettes, they would add in slightly colorful eyeshadow that was just easy to incorporate into your mainly neutral look. So the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette has mainly like warm toned neutrals, but it kind of adds like a little bit of a colorful orangey red tone. The Urban Decay Naked Cherry also does the same thing. So you do get some toned down shades, but you also get some brighter berries that you wouldn't typically see in the original Naked palettes. The newest one, the Urban Decay Naked Ultraviolet, was not a favorite among a lot of people who love colorful eyeshadow, but I can definitely appreciate it because, you know, you do get some of your toned down neutrals, but you do get some really pretty purples. So I just feel like it's easy to pull purple into more of a toned down neutral look with this palette, especially because Urban Decay's formula, again, it's not necessarily the most intense or vibrant, but it's easy to use, and it typically is a nice option if you don't want to spend a lot of time on your eyeshadow. So I wanted to give them just kind of like an honorable mention at the end of the video. They're not necessarily the most intense or colorful palettes, but I do think they make color very approachable for someone who is a little bit more of a beginner or doesn't necessarily like to wear color on an everyday basis. So those are all of the eyeshadow palettes I wanted to mention in today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below which brand makes your favorite colorful formula, or if you have a go-to colorful eyeshadow palette, I would love to know so I can check it out as well. But I appreciate you guys watching. If you want to see my video on my favorite neutral palettes, I'll link it on the screen and in the description box below for you guys. But I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye.